There's certain stories in my life that I will never forget, and because of that, I feel like sometimes maybe I tell them repetitively. But when I think of certain feelings or emotions, that story comes to my mind over and over and over again. So when we get to this idea of fear, when I think of fear, I think back to this one night. I was 19 years old. Yeah, I was in college. I was 19 years old, and I was working for an organization where we were going to these little towns and doing Bible clubs for little kids. And someone let us stay at their house in Johns Island. Now, Johns Island is right outside of Charleston, so you've got all those beautiful old oak trees and all the hanging Spanish moss and all that. But they didn't use this house anymore. It was an older woman who now lived in a nursing home, essentially. And her house had been just sitting there. So she said, yes, please use my home. So we pulled in through the old Spanish moss, and that was a little bit kind of creepy, I guess, but not super creepy. We opened the door. It had that classic like creak to it, if you know that noise. And I don't know how to explain this house except it was just creepy. It had all these little strangely shaped rooms with little nooks and kind of spots to hide. And it had this one room, I promise you, it had this one room that was nothing but like 3-foot high porcelain dolls with those like wide open eyes just like looking at you like that. And it was super creepy. So because we were stupid, there's probably about 7 of us staying in this house for the week. Because we were stupid, we decided to watch this horror movie before we went to bed. So we watched a horror movie in this creepy house in this strange area, kind of isolated from everything else, and then we went to bed that night. And at about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm sharing a bed with someone else there because there's only so many beds in the place. And I'm sharing this like big bed, and then I wake up, and I never wake up in the middle of the night. And this guy's name was Torrance. Torrance is sitting up in the bed. And I turn and I look at Torrance, and I know Torrance pretty well. We'd worked together for a while. Still, it's weird to have to like share a room with someone you just work with. It was kind of strange. And I look over at Torrance, and Torrance is sitting up in bed like I'm up right now. He's sitting up in bed. And I look at him, and I say, Torrance, are you okay? And he turned, and he looked at me, eyes wide open, and he said, they'll kill us. They'll kill us all. Now, I froze. I have no clue what to say back to that. I'm just dead frozen, looking at this guy who I'm in this room with and thinking like, so I asked him the stupidest question maybe possible, which was this. This is what I honestly said. I said, how? And he looked at me right in the eyes, and he said, in the air. They'll put something in the air. And at that, he laid back down, rolled over, out cold. I am freaked. But you got to understand, I'm a man at this point. I'm 19 years old. You know, I'm a man. And so my manly response to this was I took the covers and I pulled them up just to the top of right here so I could like see, I guess, if anything was coming. But so much so, because Torrance said they're going to put something in the air, so I could, I guess, protect myself from it. Now, the reality is Torrance was just having some sort of weird dream. And he's apparently a sleep talker of some variety, but he had no memory of it at all. But I spent the next 3 hours, I could not fall back asleep, with the sheet right here, looking for whoever it was who was going to put something in the air, and just freaking out. So when I think of fear, that's what I think of more than anything else. I bring up that story today because I want to introduce you to a character from the Bible, someone who understood fear well. His name was John Mark. You've probably heard of him, even though you're not sure you've heard of him. If you've kind of read through the Bible or been in a Bible class, you've heard some of the stuff about him. I tell you that story because I want to introduce you to a character who understood fear really well. His name was John Mark. Some of you have heard of him, some of you haven't. John Mark was really, really young when we first meet him in the Bible. He is following Jesus. He's hanging around with these disciples who are adults. And he's hanging around with Jesus enough that he finds himself at the moment, he was with Jesus at the moment when Jesus is arrested. So they're in this garden, and these giant Roman soldiers come up, and Mark's there with him, and they arrest Jesus, and they grab him and take him off, and a skirmish kind of breaks out with a sword, and then Jesus says, no, stop it, stop it, stop it. And they start to take Jesus away, and one of the Roman soldiers grabs John Mark. Now, John Mark is probably around your age. And they grab John Mark. And John Mark is just wearing essentially what you would like call now, it's a giant shirt. I don't know how to explain it. But for us, it would look like a huge robe, like that's all the way around him. And he just sort of like pulls his head in it. I don't know how to, I can't do it. I couldn't even physically do it if I had to save my life. And wiggles his way out of his shirt. And then underneath it, he's wearing nothing. And so he has to strategically decide, stay in my clothes and be arrested by this Roman soldier or run away naked. So when we meet John Mark, he is literally, the first time we meet him, he is sprinting away from Jesus naked. Just running away. Nope, not following Jesus right now, running away naked. And I think we've all kind of felt that way before. I think we've all felt when the fear of life got us, that we wanted to follow Jesus. We've been following Jesus, but man, when the fear comes, we will do anything to get away from it. We will run away because of what's happened in life. And if you kind of have felt that feeling, it's deflating spiritually, isn't it? Because you think, man, you think I'd be brave enough to like stand up for Jesus, but yet our fear makes us run. One of the next times we meet him, he shows up in a couple other spots. One of the next times we meet him, he's grown up, he's years older, he's maturing, all these sort of things. And he's become such a mature follower of Jesus that Paul asked him to go on this giant year-long mission trip with him around the world. And so he goes, and he goes through a couple of the cities and some highs and some lows, and something happens. We don't know what. Something happens. And John Mark says, I got to go home. Some people say he was homesick. Some people say he was actually sick. Some people said it was too much for him. There's all these writings about what it could be. But he bails on Paul and everyone else on the trip and comes home, and he just goes home. And down the road, he says, hey, Paul, I know you're going on another trip. Basically, can I go? And Paul says, I don't want you with me. You bailed last time. Why am I going to bring you when you're just going to run away again? I think a lot of us have felt that same way as well. Maybe it's not fear that keeps you from thinking about growing spiritually. Maybe it's your past mistakes. Maybe you said, well, I went to that youth camp and I had that experience. I gave my life to Christ. I came home. I followed him for a while, but I got back into this world down here. And I got back into this culture down here, and I just kept falling and I kept sinning. And you know what? God's not going to want anything to do with me. I've made too many mistakes. Here's your good news today, and I want you to hear it as clearly as I can say it to you. Whether your life has been driven by fear and things that have happened to you, or whether you can look back at a series of mistakes and sins and things you've done that you say, I can't believe I did this, God still wants to know you more and more and more and more. He wants you to grow in your faith more and more and more. And you are not defined by your fears, and you are not defined by your failures. So here's the big question. How do we grow? How do we get our roots? As Colossians 2, 6, and 7 said, to root ourselves in Christ. How do we get those roots down deeper and deeper and deeper? I'm going to give you two very simple ways. Now, when I say simple, understand, simple and easy are not the same things. It is simple to dunk a basketball. You jump, hold basketball, throw and hoop. Done. Got it. It is not easy to dunk a basketball. In a minute, we're going to show a picture of me from high school dunking a basketball. Let's go to that. I'm just kidding. That doesn't exist because I could never do it. Even though I could simply understand it, the difficulty is in the doing. So two simple but difficult tasks. Are you ready? Two simple, difficult tasks. This is our takeaway for today. Here's number one. If you want to grow in your faith, if you want to put down deeper roots, number one, you have to seek God. Now, I know that sounds kind of like, well, of course you have to seek God. But what does that mean? Here's a couple of scriptures on it. This is James 4:8. It says, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. See, there's this scriptural truth in there that if we pursue God, he will pursue us, which is so literally mind-blowing. If we will seek after God, then he will seek after us. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it's impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. I hope you caught that end of that verse. God rewards those who seek him. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to make that team or get into that school or you're going to have the job or the girlfriend or the boyfriend or whatever. That's not the reward. The reward is him. If you seek him, he will find you. Now, what does it mean to seek God? It's very simple. It's like every other relationship. You have to spend time with him. There's no checklist in heaven for Bible readings. But what it is getting to know this person, seeking them. Who does it say God is? I'm going to dig in and dig in and dig in and find who he is. And then on the other side, and I think one of the most intimidating things, and later come talk to me if you think I'm wrong on this, I think a lot of you are really intimidated by the idea of prayer. When what prayer is an open invitation for a conversation. So if you are stressed, if you are struggling, if fear and anxiety are ruling your day, the God of the universe, the maker of all things, he wants you to come and not with a theeth and a thoueth and how shalt, but with God, my stress, my anxiety, my fears, my life, my past. It's weighing on me. Lord, help. Read some of the Psalms. It's amazing how honest David is with his fears, his anxieties, and everything going on in his mind. The last way you can seek God is the same way actually that John Mark did. Put yourself around people who are also seeking God and work as a team. John Mark surrounded himself with men and women who were trying to figure out who Jesus was, get to know Jesus, follow Jesus. Who do you surround yourself with? If you want to grow, surround yourself with people who are walking that same path. And finally, and last, the second way that you can grow spiritually is very simple and very difficult. Don't be satisfied with this world. It says in James 4:8, I just read this to you a second ago, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. And then it says this. This is kind of heavy sounding, so follow. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. He says, don't be double-minded. So essentially where he's going, he said, listen, you want Jesus and you want this world. One of the most difficult things to do is to let go of your past, to let go of your past sins, because they will want to hang on to you. But when you start growing spiritually, when you start experiencing the peace and the joy and the goodness of Christ, all of a sudden, and I can tell you mainly from my perspective, or my life experience, when I started to experiencing the goodness of Christ, all that sin, that stuff that owned me, didn't own me the same way. So seek God, go after God, and as you're running after God, make sure you are seeing what was holding you down before and start running away from that. And you want to talk about the most important way to do that? Find a person, whether it's an adult, a fellow student, someone who believes in Jesus, someone who's running after Jesus and saying, I can't stop doing this. I cannot stop gossiping. I cannot stop looking at these things. I cannot stop my anger. I cannot stop. And say, I need your help. Find accountability. Find other people who are pursuing Jesus and run with them after the same way. There's this great end to John Mark, this amazing end to the story of John Mark. At the end of his life, actually the end of Paul's life, I guess I should say, he writes in this book called 2 Timothy that Paul writes later in his life. And do you know what he says about John Mark, this guy who he wanted nothing to do with? Bring John, it says 2 Timothy 4:11. It says, bring John Mark to me, for he is useful to me. That may not seem like a big deal to you. But if you've ever had anyone give up on you, and then you turn into a person that's so impressive that that person goes, huh, there's something different there. That's what happened between John Mark and Paul. He said, wow, that guy changed. Do you want to change? Do you want to grow? You're going to have to seek God. You're going to have to use your time, your energy, your effort to seek God. You're going to have to be willing to let go of some of those things from your past that held you down. But you don't have to do it alone. There is a God in heaven who says he knows every good deed he has before you. Ephesians 2:10 says he has prepared them in advance for you to do. You're not alone. You're not alone on this campus. You have people who want to help you grow. And most importantly, you are not alone in heaven.